If someone had told me that a marriage could end without shouting, without slamming doors, without a single tear being shed in the moment, I would have laughed and said that was impossible. Because heartbreak, I believed, was loud. It was supposed to come with screaming, shaking hands, and a woman collapsing on the kitchen floor. But the night my marriage died was quiet, almost gentle. It was a normal evening in our home in Surbiton, just outside London. The kind of house you walk past every day without noticing. Warm lights in the windows, clean curtains, a place that looked safe. My husband, Oliver, was in the kitchen cooking dinner. He wore the navy apron I gave him for our wedding anniversary. He was humming softly, completely at ease, stirring a pan as if nothing in the world could touch him. From behind, he looked like the perfect British husband, calm, reliable, devoted. I was sitting at the kitchen island, pretending to read a magazine, listening to the familiar sounds of our life, the clink of cutlery, the low hum of the extractor fan, the smell of roasted meat filling the room. This was our normal. And then his phone lit up. No sound, just a cold blue glow against the marble worktop. I did not mean to look, but my eyes moved on their own. 3 words appeared on the screen. I miss you. That was all. No explanation, no apology, no name that meant nothing to me. Just 3 words that told me everything. In that moment, something inside me went completely still. I did not cry, I did not confront him, I did not ask questions, because the pain had already passed. What remained was clarity, and a decision. I realized then that some women scream when they are betrayed, others plan. If you want to know what I did next, and why that quiet evening became the beginning of the end for everyone involved, comment 1 below to tell me you are watching till the end. 3 words. That was all it took to destroy 7 years of marriage. I miss you. The kitchen was still warm. The oven was on low heat. The smell of roasted meat wrapped itself around the room like a blanket. Everything about that space spoke of safety, routine, and belonging. And yet, in the middle of that warmth, those 3 words felt colder than anything I had ever known. I remember staring at the screen for a second longer than necessary, as if my mind refused to translate what my eyes were seeing. For a brief moment, I told myself it could be nothing, a mistake, a message meant for someone else. But my body reacted before my thoughts could catch up. My chest tightened, not with pain, with disbelief. I looked up at Oliver. He was still facing the stove, completely unaware. He stirred the pan slowly, relaxed, humming under his breath. The contrast was almost cruel. Here was a man cooking dinner for his wife, and here was a phone on the counter telling me I was not the only woman in his world. The warmth in the room suddenly felt artificial, like a set built for a play. Everything looked the same, but something essential had been removed. I remember thinking how quiet it was. No dramatic music, no sudden realization on his face, no thunder outside. Just me, standing there, holding a truth that did not belong in that room. As I stood frozen, memories began to surface. Small moments I had dismissed at the time. Details I had explained away because trust made me generous. The late nights that came with vague excuses. The phone always face down on the table. The way he stepped outside to take certain calls. The sudden concern for privacy he never had before. At the time, I told myself I was being paranoid, that this was what adulthood looked like. That marriage was built on giving each other space. Now, those memories lined up perfectly, like pieces of a puzzle that only made sense once the picture was complete. I felt stupid, not because he had cheated, but because I had protected him from my own instincts. The shock did not last long. It melted into something far more dangerous: emptiness. I did not feel anger right away. I did not feel sadness. What I felt was a strange, hollow silence inside my body, as if all emotion had stepped back to let reason take over. I realized then that grief does not always arrive as tears. Sometimes it arrives as clarity. I picked up the phone again, just long enough to confirm what I already knew. The message was real. It had not disappeared. It was not a hallucination. I miss you. No context, no hesitation, no shame. Whoever sent it believed she was welcome. I placed the phone back on the counter. My hands were steady. That was the moment I understood something important about myself. I was not going to scream. I was not going to beg. And I was not going to confront him without proof, because men like Oliver were skilled at explanations, at turning doubt into misunderstanding, at making women feel emotional and irrational for asking the right questions. If I spoke too soon, he would lie. If I cried, he would comfort me without telling the truth. If I exploded, he would paint himself as the victim. I needed more than words. I needed certainty. As Oliver turned around with a smile and asked me to taste the gravy, I looked at his face and realized I was seeing him clearly for the first time in years. Not the husband I believed in, but the man he truly was. And in that moment, standing in our warm kitchen with a cold truth burning quietly inside me, I made a decision that would change everything. I would not react. I would act. And I would make sure that when the truth came out, no one would be able to deny it. I did not cry that night, not because I was strong in the way people like to imagine strength, but because crying would have been pointless. Tears are loud. They demand attention, and attention was exactly what I could not afford to give away. If I had screamed, Oliver would have rushed to me with that familiar look of concern. He would have held my hands, told me I was imagining things, that I was tired, stressed, overthinking. Men like him are very good at that. They do not deny immediately. They confuse. They soften the truth until it becomes something you're ashamed for questioning. I had learned that lesson long before I met Oliver. I did not grow up in comfort. Nothing in my life was handed to me easily. I worked my way through university, while everyone else seemed to glide through it. I learned early that survival depends on knowing when to speak and when to stay silent. Silence, when used correctly, is not weakness. It is leverage. As I sat there in that warm kitchen, listening to Oliver talk about work as if nothing had happened, I realized something uncomfortable about myself. I was not shocked because I was naive. I was shocked because I had trusted him. And trust, once broken, does not need drama. It needs clarity. I thought back to the woman I had been before marriage, the one who had learned to read people carefully, the one who noticed patterns, inconsistencies, shifts in behavior. Somewhere along the way, I had convinced myself that love required blindness. That was my mistake. I understood then that if I confronted him without proof, I would lose control of the narrative. He would become defensive. He would accuse me of invading his privacy. He would twist the conversation until I found myself apologizing for asking questions. I had seen it happen to other women, intelligent women, capable women, reduced to doubt by men who knew exactly how to exploit emotion. I refused to become one of them. So instead of reacting, I observed. I watched the way he avoided my eyes just a second longer than usual, the way his phone never left his reach, the way he flinched almost imperceptibly when it vibrated again on the counter. That flinch told me everything. This was not a misunderstanding. This was a habit. and habits leave traces. I realized that what I needed was not an argument, but evidence, not tears, but facts, something so clear, so undeniable that no explanation could erase it. Because the truth is this: when a woman raises her voice, she is often called emotional. When she raises proof, she is called dangerous. And I was ready to be dangerous. I finished my dinner slowly that night. I laughed at the right moments. I nodded when Oliver spoke. I even smiled when he reached for my hand across the table. Inside, I was already separating myself from him. Emotionally, I stepped back. Strategically, I stepped forward. I knew that whatever was happening between him and the woman who sent that message had been going on longer than a single evening. Affairs do not begin with confidence. They begin with permission. Someone, somewhere, had been encouraged to believe she had a place in my life. That belief would be my entry point. I also knew one thing with absolute certainty: I could not afford to be wrong. Because if I accused him without evidence and failed, I would lose more than my dignity. I would lose my position, my credibility, my ability to protect myself. So I made a promise to myself. I would not ask a single question until I already knew the answers. I would not confront him until the truth was sitting in my hands, and I would not let emotion dictate my actions. That night, when Oliver kissed my forehead and asked if I was tired, I said, "Just a long day." It was not a lie. It had been the longest day of my marriage. If you are listening to this and you think you know where this is going, comment 1 below. Not because you are curious, but because you recognize the moment when silence becomes power. I waited until Oliver turned back to the stove. It was a small thing, really, just a shift of his shoulders, a moment when his attention belonged entirely to the simmering pan in front of him. That was all I needed. I reached for his phone as if it were the most natural thing in the world, not hurried, not hesitant. The calmness of my movement surprised even me. The screen was still warm from the message that had appeared moments earlier. For a second, I simply held it in my hand. This was the device he slept beside every night, the place where his secrets lived quietly, believing they were safe. I typed in the passcode, our wedding date, 6 digits that once meant commitment, trust, and forever. Now they felt like a bad joke told at my expense. The screen unlocked instantly. No hesitation, no alarm, no warning. Inside, everything was exactly where it had always been. Familiar apps, familiar layout, familiar lies. I opened WhatsApp. Her name was there, sitting at the top of the screen, as if it had every right to be. I did not scroll. I did not read back through the messages. I already knew enough. What mattered now was not understanding their story. It was controlling the next chapter. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I remember noticing how steady they were. No shaking, no panic, only focus. I typed slowly, carefully, choosing words that would sound like him, not too eager, not too formal, casual, confident. "My wife isn't home tonight." I read the sentence twice before sending it. 4 seconds passed. Then I pressed send. The message left his phone without a sound. No vibration, no alert. Just a quiet blue tick appearing beneath the words, confirming that it had been delivered. In that moment, a strange sense of power washed over me. Not excitement, control. I took a screenshot immediately. One clean image, time-stamped, undeniable. I sent it to my own phone. Then I deleted the message from his chat. Not just for deception, for precision. I needed him to be completely unaware. I needed the evening to continue as if nothing had changed. I placed the phone back on the counter, same position, same angle, as if it had never been touched. My heart was beating faster now, but my mind remained clear. I understood the risk. If he turned around too soon, if you reached for his phone, if anything broke the rhythm of that ordinary evening, the entire plan would collapse. But danger sharpens the mind. Every sound in the kitchen seemed amplified. The scrape of a spoon, the low hum of the oven, the quiet crackle of heat. I leaned back against the counter and forced myself to breathe normally. Oliver turned toward me with a smile, completely unaware that he had just invited the woman he was betraying me with into our home. "Can you taste this?" he asked. I stepped forward and did exactly that. I tasted the sauce. I nodded. I smiled. "It's perfect," I said. And in that moment, I realized something unsettling. I was capable of far more than he had ever imagined. As dinner continued, my mind began calculating distances and time. From the office to our street, from her flat to our door. Traffic patterns, train schedules. She would come. Women who send messages like that do not hesitate when they are told the wife is not home. That sentence carries a power of its own. My wife isn't home tonight. It is not just an invitation, it is permission. It tells the other woman she has been chosen, that she is welcome, that the door is open. I had handed her exactly what she believed she deserved, and now all I had to do was wait. I watched Oliver closely as we ate. He was relaxed, comfortable. His laughter came easily. Every now and then, his eyes flicked toward the hallway, as if expecting something, or someone. He did not check his phone. He did not suspect a thing. That was when I knew the trap was set. I was no longer reacting to betrayal. I was directing it. Whatever happened next would not be accidental. It would not be emotional. It would not be messy. It would be deliberate. And when the doorbell finally rang, no one would be able to say this was a misunderstanding, because I had the proof, and I had time. If you think you know what happens when the woman on the other side of that message actually arrives, stay with me, because this was only the beginning. Dinner continued as if nothing had happened. Oliver moved around the kitchen with the ease of a man who believed he was safe. He set the table, poured the wine, and spoke about his day in the same tone he always used, calm, casual, completely untroubled. He talked about meetings that went on too long, about a colleague who kept missing deadlines, about a project that might finally get him noticed by senior management. I nodded in the right places. I smiled when he smiled. I lifted my glass when he proposed a quiet toast to the weekend. From the outside, we looked like a couple winding down after another ordinary working day. From the inside, I felt as if I was sitting beside a stranger. Every sound in the room seemed sharper than usual. The scrape of cutlery against plates, the soft clink of glass, the hum of the refrigerator filling the pauses in conversation. I was acutely aware of time. The clock on the wall sat just above the doorway leading to the hall. I had never paid much attention to it before. It had always been part of the background, something you glanced at without thinking. That night, it became impossible to ignore. 7:15. Oliver took a bite of roast beef and smiled in satisfaction. He told me it was one of his best attempts yet. I told him it was lovely. 7:22. He asked if I wanted more potatoes. His voice was warm, familiar, affectionate. I shook my head. 7:30. The second hand moved with unbearable precision. Each tick felt deliberate, almost mocking, as if the clock itself knew what was coming and was enjoying the wait. I wondered where she was, whether she was still at the office, pretending to work while glancing at her phone, whether she had already left, smoothing her hair, choosing what to wear, rehearsing the moment she would walk through my front door, believing she was welcome. 7:38. Oliver laughed at something on his phone, a news article, a joke sent by a friend. He did not check his messages. I studied his face while he was distracted, the relaxed jaw, the absence of guilt, the complete lack of awareness. It struck me then how easily some people separate their lives, how effortlessly they move between roles without the weight of consequence. Husband, lover, liar. 7:45. I excused myself to get a glass of water. As I passed the clock, I noticed my reflection in the glass frame. My face looked calm, almost serene. No one would have guessed that every nerve in my body was awake. When I returned to the table, Oliver was clearing the plates. He told me to sit and relax, that he would take care of the washing up. I thanked him. He kissed my cheek as he passed, his touch gentle and absent-minded. That touch felt foreign now, like a gesture learned through repetition rather than feeling. 7:52. The sound of running water filled the kitchen. Plates clinked softly as he stacked them in the sink. I sat in the living room, my back straight, my hands folded neatly in my lap. I did not turn on the television. I did not pick up a book. My attention was fixed entirely on the front door. Waiting does something strange to the mind. Part of me hoped the doorbell would never ring, that this was all a misunderstanding, that I would wake up tomorrow and feel foolish for doubting him. Another part of me wanted it to happen immediately, to tear away the last layer of illusion and be done with it. 8 o'clock. The water stopped running. Oliver dried his hands and joined me on the sofa. He picked up his phone and scrolled through the news, completely at ease. The silence between us was thick but unremarkable to him. He had grown accustomed to my quiet. To him, this was just another peaceful evening. To me, it felt like standing on the edge of something irreversible. 8:05. The seconds stretched unnaturally. Each minute felt longer than the one before it. I could hear the ticking of the clock from the living room now, a steady reminder that time was moving, whether I wanted it to or not. Oliver shifted beside me and asked, "Are you all right? You seem tired." I looked at him and replied, "I'm fine, just a long day." It was the truth. 8:12. I imagined footsteps in the hallway outside. I imagined the lift doors opening. I imagined her standing there, adjusting her coat, rehearsing her smile. My breathing remained slow and controlled. This was not fear. This was anticipation. 8:15. And then, finally, the sound I had been waiting for. The doorbell rang. Not loud, not urgent, just a single press. But in that quiet house, it landed like a blow. Oliver lifted his head sharply. His eyes flicked from the door to the clock and then to me. "Who could that be at this hour?" he asked. I did not answer. I stood up, and in that moment, I knew there was no turning back. If you are still listening, stay with me, because what stood on the other side of that door changed everything. And if you want to hear what happened next, comment 1 below so I know you are still here. I walked to the door slowly, not because I was afraid, but because I wanted to feel every second of that moment. The hallway light was dimmer than the living room, casting long shadows along the wall. My hand rested on the door handle for a brief pause, long enough for my breathing to settle. Behind me, I could feel Oliver watching, waiting. I opened the door. Standing there, was a young woman. She was smaller than I had imagined. Slim, neatly dressed, her coat buttoned carefully as if she had planned this moment down to the smallest detail. Her hair fell softly around her shoulders, styled but not too much. Her makeup was subtle, youthful, meant to look effortless. In her hands, she held a small paper bag from a bakery nearby, the kind of thing you bring when you think you are visiting someone who wants to see you. For half a second she smiled. It was a reflex, automatic, confident, and then her eyes met mine. The smile froze. I watched it disappear from her face as reality crashed into her. Her pupils widened, the colour drained from her cheeks. Her grip on the bag tightened as if it were the only thing keeping her upright. She had not expected me. She had expected him. Behind her eyes, I could almost see the scene she had rehearsed. Oliver opening the door, his surprised smile, the relief of being welcomed in, perhaps even his arms around her. Instead, she found herself face to face with the woman whose place she had believed was empty. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Silence hung between us, heavy and deliberate. She glanced past me into the house, her gaze searching desperately for an explanation, for him, for reassurance. I did not move aside. I did not raise my voice. I simply looked at her. That seemed to unsettle her more than shouting ever could. I heard Oliver behind me, his footsteps stopping short. "Who is it?" he asked, his voice suddenly less steady than before. The young woman flinched at the sound of his voice. Her shoulders tensed, her body shifted slightly backward, as if her instinct was already telling her to run. I smiled. Not warmly, not kindly. I smiled with control. "Hello, Emily," I said. Her name landed between us like a dropped glass. She swallowed hard. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. This was the first time I had said her name out loud, and she knew immediately that this was not a coincidence. "I believe you are here to see my husband," I continued calmly. The bag slipped slightly in her hands. She caught it just in time, her fingers trembling now. I think there has been a misunderstanding," she managed to say. Her voice was thinner than I expected, younger. Her eyes darted again toward the interior of the house, as if she were hoping Oliver would step forward and rescue her from this nightmare. But he did not move. I could feel him behind me, frozen. "I do not think there is," I replied. I stepped back just enough to allow her to see the living room, the familiar furniture, the framed photos on the wall, our life. This was not a temporary space. This was not an empty house. This was a home. Her breathing became shallow. Her chest rose and fell too quickly. The confidence she had arrived with was gone, replaced by something raw and unguarded. Fear. "I was told your wife was not home tonight," she said quietly, almost pleading now. I nodded slowly. "Yes," I said. "That message was sent from this house." Her eyes snapped back to mine. Understanding flickered across her face, followed by horror. She realized then that she was not standing in the doorway of a secret affair. She was standing in the middle of a trap. Behind me, Oliver finally spoke. "Hannah," he said softly, as if my name alone could undo what was happening. "Let me explain." I raised one hand without turning around. "Not yet," I said. My attention remained fixed on Emily. She was shrinking before my eyes. Her shoulders curved inward, her chin dropped. The woman who had walked here, believing she was wanted, was disappearing. In her place stood a girl who understood she had crossed a line she could not step back over. "I am sorry," she whispered. Her apology was not brave, it was not defiant, it was survival. I studied her face closely, the youth, the uncertainty, The realization that whatever fantasy she had been living in had just ended. I felt no urge to comfort her. Compassion had left me the moment I read those 3 words on the screen. I miss you. You should come inside, I said at last. Her head snapped up in shock. Come inside, I repeated, my voice steady, since you are already here. She hesitated. Every instinct in her body was telling her to leave, but she did not, because she knew that turning away now would not save her. She stepped across the threshold. The door closed behind her with a soft click, and with that sound, the evening crossed a line from which none of us could retreat. I let her sit down, not because I felt generous, but because making someone stand while you remain calm only shortens the fear, and I wanted her to feel it fully. I gestured toward the armchair opposite the sofa. It was the seat we usually offered to guests, neutral, polite, distant. She hesitated, looking at Oliver, waiting for permission that did not come. So she sat. Perched on the edge of the cushion, back straight, knees pressed together, hands clenched tightly in her lap. She did not relax. She did not lean back. She looked like someone waiting for a verdict. Oliver stood near the doorway, frozen, as if the floor beneath him had turned to ice. His eyes moved between the 2 of us, unable to settle anywhere. I walked past him without touching him and went into the kitchen. I will get you something to drink, I said lightly. My voice sounded almost pleasant. In the kitchen, everything was exactly as it had been minutes earlier. The warmth, the order, the illusion of normality. I opened the cupboard where we kept our cups. On the left were the porcelain teacups, white, delicate, with a thin gold rim, wedding gifts, reserved for us and for people who belonged in our lives. On the right, at the very back, was a pack of disposable plastic cups, the kind you keep for builders or outdoor barbecues. I did not hesitate. I took 1 plastic cup. I filled it with tap water. No ice, no lemon, just water. When I returned to the living room, I placed the cup on the glass table in front of her. The sound it made was dull, hollow. For myself and Oliver, I poured tea into the porcelain cups. I carried them carefully, placing them gently on the table. The contrast was unmistakable. Plastic and porcelain, temporary and permanent. She noticed immediately. Her eyes dropped to the cup, then lifted briefly to mine before falling again. Her cheeks flushed, not with embarrassment, but with humiliation. Oliver had not yet sat down. Sit, I said quietly. It was not a request. He obeyed. He lowered himself onto the sofa beside me, keeping a careful distance, as if proximity alone might trigger an explosion. Even with the heating on, I could see sweat forming at his temples. The room fell into silence. Not the comfortable kind, the dangerous kind. The kind that presses against your ears and forces your thoughts to get louder. I picked up my tea and took a slow sip. Emily, I said calmly, breaking the quiet. How is the internship going? She flinched slightly at the sound of her name. It is going well, she replied in a small voice, very educational. I nodded as if genuinely interested. And Oliver has been a good mentor, I asked. She hesitated. Her fingers tightened around the plastic cup. Yes, she said, he has been very supportive. I turned my head slightly toward Oliver. That is good to hear, I said. I always tell people how dedicated he is, at work and at home. Oliver swallowed hard. He stared at the floor. I leaned back into the sofa, crossing my legs slowly, deliberately. I imagine you must admire him, I continued, my tone conversational. A man who balances his career and family so well. Emily did not answer. Her silence spoke louder than any confession. I let it stretch. Seconds passed. Oliver shifted beside me. His knee bounced nervously. I reached out and rested my hand lightly on his arm. He stiffened instantly. The physical contact was enough to make his breathing uneven. "You see," I said softly, "we have built quite a life together." I gestured around the room. The house, the routines, the plans. I smiled faintly. It would be terrible for someone to misunderstand their place in all of this. Emily stared at the floor now, her shoulders slowly curling inward. Oliver finally spoke. "Hannah," he said hoarsely, "this has gone far enough." I turned to him. My expression did not change. "It has only just begun," I replied. I took another sip of tea, unhurried. "Emily," I said again, "you must have been surprised to see me open the door." She nodded weakly. "I thought so," I continued. "You see, messages can be misleading." Oliver's head snapped up. His eyes met mine for the first time since she had arrived. Understanding dawned slowly, painfully. I watched it spread across his face. "You did not think," I said to him now, "that your phone might not be as private as you believed." His mouth opened, then closed again. No sound came out. Emily looked between us, confusion mixing with fear. I did not explain further. I did not need to. Silence finished the work for me. Minutes passed. No one moved. The clock ticked loudly on the wall. Oliver's breathing grew shallow. His hands trembled in his lap. He was unraveling. Not with shouting, not with tears, but with the slow realization that he was no longer in control. I stood up suddenly. Both of them flinched. "I will just check on something," I said calmly. I left the room, leaving them alone together for the first time. From the hallway, I could hear nothing. Not a word. Not a whisper. Fear had stolen their voices. When I returned, they were sitting exactly as I had left them. I sat down again, closer to Oliver this time. My arm brushed against his. He did not pull away. He did not dare. "This is not about shouting," I said quietly. "It is about truth." I looked directly at Emily, and understanding consequences. Her eyes filled with tears, but she did not cry. Oliver finally broke. "I am sorry," he said, his voice cracking. "This was a mistake." I looked at him, then at her, then back at him. "A mistake," I repeated. The word hung in the air, fragile and ridiculous. I smiled faintly. And in that moment, they both understood something essential. I was not here to beg. I was not here to negotiate. I was here to make sure neither of them would ever forget this night. I did not raise my voice. I did not accuse. I did not ask questions. Instead, I did something far more unsettling. I talked about our future. I turned slightly toward Oliver, resting my hand on his knee as if nothing in this room were broken. "You know," I said calmly, "I was thinking again about the house." He stiffened under my touch, but he did not move. Emily looked up. I could feel her attention snap toward me instantly. "The one near the river," I continued. "The one with the small garden and the old oak tree at the back." Oliver swallowed. "We talked about it last spring," I said. "Do you remember? You said it would be perfect for weekends away from the city." He nodded faintly, trapped. "I still think so," I went on, "especially now that we are more settled. Work is stable. The mortgage here is manageable. It feels like the right time to think long term." I smiled gently, as if sharing a private dream. Emily sat completely still. I could almost hear her thoughts racing. She had walked into this house believing she had a role. Now she was realizing she was not even in the script. I even spoke to my parents about it, I added. They loved the idea. They said they would help with the renovation. Just a little support to get us started. Oliver's breathing grew shallow. He knew exactly what this meant. Family involvement, shared assets, roots. Things that could not be undone with apologies. And then there is the question of children, I said softly. That was the word that finally cracked something in the room. Children. Oliver's body tensed visibly. Emily's fingers curled into the fabric of her skirt. We are not getting any younger, I continued, my tone thoughtful rather than emotional. And I do not want to rush it, but I do think next year would be a good time to start trying. I looked at Oliver with a warm, expectant expression. You always said you wanted a family that felt real, not just busy, not just successful, but grounded. He could not look at me. He could not look at her. He stared straight ahead, caught between two realities. Emily shifted in her seat, her breath uneven now. This was not what she had come here for. There was no room for her in conversations about mortgages and grandparents and nurseries. She belonged to stolen hours and hidden messages, not to daylight plans. I have even started thinking about schools, I added lightly. Not seriously, of course, just browsing. There are some lovely ones not far from the river house. Emily's face drained of colour. I watched it happen without blinking. I was not being cruel. I was being precise. I suppose it sounds boring, I said, with a small laugh. But this is what marriage becomes after a while. It is not about excitement anymore. It is about building something that lasts. I turned my head toward Emily then, included her, acknowledged her. I hope you understand, I said politely. When people talk about affairs, they forget that what really hurts is not the betrayal itself. It is the misunderstanding of importance. She looked at me, eyes wide. I continued calmly. You see, Oliver and I have a life that extends far beyond moments, beyond feelings, beyond attraction. I gestured subtly around the room. This is not passion. This is infrastructure. Oliver flinched. Emily's lips parted, but she said nothing. I leaned closer to Oliver, resting my head briefly against his shoulder. The intimacy was deliberate. He sat rigid, his jaw clenched. I know this is overwhelming, I said softly, but clarity usually is. Emily's eyes filled with tears, but they did not fall. She finally understood. She was not competing with me. There was no competition. There was only reality. Oliver opened his mouth, as if to speak. I placed a finger gently on his arm. Not now, I said quietly. He closed it again. I turned back to Emily. I am sure you did not intend to step into something like this, I said. People often mistake attention for belonging. Her shoulders began to shake. This was not humiliation. This was collapse. The slow, painful recognition that she had built hope on something hollow. I think it would be best if you went home now, I said at last. Not cold, not angry, final. She stood up on unsteady legs. She did not look at Oliver. She could not. She murmured an apology that barely made it past her lips and reached for her coat. I watched her walk to the door without rushing her. When it closed behind her, the room felt strangely quiet. Not tense, resolved. Oliver remained seated, staring at the floor. The future I had just described still hung in the air between us, heavy, unavoidable. If you are listening and you felt the shift in this moment, comment 1 below. Not because of the drama, but because you understand what it means to take your life back without raising your voice. She realized it was a trap without me ever saying the word. The understanding arrived slowly, like a shadow sliding across her face. It began in her eyes, a brief flicker of doubt, then calculation, then fear. I watched it happen in silence. Emily stood near the edge of the rug, her coat half on, her hands hovering uselessly, as if she no longer knew what to do with them. She glanced once at Oliver, searching for a signal, a denial, anything that might save her from the truth forming in her mind. He gave her nothing. Oliver sat motionless on the sofa, his shoulders slumped, his gaze fixed somewhere between the floor and his own shoes. The man who once spoke so confidently now looked as if every word had been taken from him. I did not rush the moment. Truth has weight. It needs time to settle. Emily's eyes moved back to me, slowly, carefully, as if she were afraid that meeting my gaze would finish her. "You said," she began, then stopped. Her voice failed her. I waited. "You said your wife wasn't home," she tried again, quieter this time. I nodded. "Yes," I replied calmly. "That message was sent." Her breath caught. "But you were here," she whispered. I tilted my head slightly. "I was," I said, "all evening." The room seemed to shrink around her. She took a step back, then another, as if distance might protect her. Her heel caught the edge of the rug, and she stumbled slightly before regaining her balance. "You knew," she said, her voice trembling now. "You knew, and you still let me come." I did not deny it. "I needed to know how far this would go," I said, "and now I do." Oliver flinched. Emily's eyes widened as the last pieces fell into place. The message, the timing, the calm, the cup of water, the conversation about the future. It had all been staged, not to humiliate her, to reveal her. Her face drained of colour so completely it was almost shocking. Her lips parted, but no words came out. She looked suddenly very young, very small. "I didn't mean to," she said at last. "I thought he loved me." Oliver closed his eyes. I remained still. "Love," I repeated quietly, "is not something that hides in messages." She shook her head, tears finally spilling over. "He told me you were distant," she said, "busy, that your marriage was already over." I looked at Oliver then. He did not look back. "I never said that," he muttered weakly. Emily let out a broken sound that was half laugh, half sob. "So it was all lies," she said, not a question, a realization. I did not need to add anything. Silence confirmed it for me. She turned toward the door abruptly, her movements panicked now. Her bag slipped from her shoulder and fell to the floor, spilling its contents. Lipstick rolled away. Keys clattered loudly against the wood. She dropped to her knees to gather them, her hands shaking so violently she struggled to pick anything up. I watched without moving. This was not cruelty. This was consequence. When she finally stood again, her eyes were red, her makeup smeared. The confident young woman who had arrived at my doorstep earlier that evening was gone. In her place stood someone who understood she had been used and exposed. "I'm sorry," she said again, not looking at me this time. "I didn't know." I believed her. Ignorance does not make someone innocent, but it does make them human. "You should go," I said simply. She nodded frantically. She reached for the door handle with shaking fingers, then paused. "Did you plan this from the start?" she asked quietly, without turning around. I considered the question. "No," I said truthfully. I planned it from the moment I realized I was being lied to. She swallowed hard. That answer seemed to break whatever strength she had left. She opened the door and fled into the hallway without looking back. The door closed behind her with a sharp click, and just like that, she was gone. The room felt different immediately. Not lighter, clearer. Oliver finally looked up at me. His face was pale, his eyes glassy. His mouth opened as if to speak, then closed again. I stood. I walked to the coffee table and picked up his phone, still lying there where he had left it earlier. I unlocked it. Our wedding date. Again. I held the screen out toward him. "You see?" I said calmly. "This is why I didn't scream." I opened the screenshot. The message. "My wife isn't home tonight." I let him read it. His shoulders collapsed inward. "I sent that," I continued, "from your phone." His head snapped up. "You what?" "I needed proof," I said, "and now I have it." I placed the phone back down gently. "This is not about her," I said. "It never was." He began to shake. "I didn't plan for it to go this far," he whispered. "It just happened." I looked at him for a long moment. "Things that just happen," I said quietly, "do not involve this many choices." He broke then. His hands came up to his face, and he let out a sound I had never heard from him before. Raw, uncontrolled. I did not comfort him. I did not shout. I simply watched, because the truth had already done its work. If you were listening and you felt the shift when the truth landed, comment 1 below. Not because of the drama, but because you understand that sometimes the strongest blow is delivered without raising your voice. Now it was just the two of us. The door had closed behind her, and the air in the living room felt charged, like the seconds after lightning, when everything goes silent, but your body still hums. Oliver stayed on the sofa, hunched forward with his hands clasped as if he were praying. He looked smaller without an audience, without the role, without the woman who made him feel powerful. I stood by the coffee table and stared at his phone. It was lying there, like nothing had happened, like it had not dragged another woman to my doorstep, like it had not carried 3 words that made my marriage rot from the inside. I picked it up. My fingers were steady. Oliver's eyes followed the movement, wide and wary. I did not shout. I did not ask for permission. I simply lifted the phone and brought it down onto the glass table with all the force I had been holding inside my chest. The crack was sharp, violent. The screen split instantly, spiderwebbing across the surface, fragments glittering under the lamp like tiny shards of ice. Oliver flinched so hard his shoulders jumped. "Hannah," he whispered. I placed the broken phone down slowly, almost gently, as if I were laying a body to rest. Then I looked at him. "Explain yourself," I said. He opened his mouth, and for a second I saw him reach for the old habits, the same smooth tone, the same rehearsed excuses, the same performance he must have used 100 times in boardrooms and meetings. "It is not what you think," he began. I let out a small, dry laugh. "A message at night saying, 'I miss you,'" I said quietly. "A woman who knows your stomach pains better than I do. A girl who arrives here holding a cupcake like she belongs in my hallway. Tell me which part of that is not what I think." His eyes dropped. He swallowed. "It was a mistake," he muttered. I stepped closer, not fast, not aggressive, just enough for him to feel my presence. "Say her name," I said. He blinked, startled. "Say it," I repeated, calm and firm. His lips trembled. "Emily," he whispered. The sound of it made something in my stomach twist, not because the name mattered, because the ease with which he said it proved how familiar it had become. I reached into my handbag and pulled out a folder. Oliver's head snapped up again. The fear in his face sharpened. Because men like him do not fear tears, they fear paperwork. I dropped the folder onto the table beside the broken phone. Sheets slid out, neat, sorted, highlighted. I had been preparing since the week the bank statement landed in my hands, and I saw money leaving our account in small, regular amounts. Amounts too tidy to be accidental, too frequent to be innocent. Oliver stared as if I had produced a weapon. I pointed to the first page. It started 3 months ago, I said. Transfers with notes like lunch and gift. A few hundred here, a few hundred there. You thought I would not notice because you kept it small. His breathing turned shallow. I flipped to the next page. And then this, I said. £1,500. Happy birthday. His mouth opened, then closed. I leaned in slightly. For my birthday, I continued, my voice still even. You bought flowers from the petrol station and told me you had been too busy to plan anything else. His eyes filled with panic. Hannah, please, he began. I held up a hand. Not yet, I said. I pulled out another sheet. Screenshots, messages, dates, times. Plans for lunches that never appeared on his calendar. Little jokes too intimate to belong to colleagues. Words that made my skin crawl because they belonged to someone trying to sound tender while behaving like a thief. I slid the screenshots across the table toward him. He did not touch them. He did not dare. I reached for the final item, a photo printed on plain paper. A strand of long dyed brown hair on the passenger seat of his car. Not mine, not ours. Evidence that did not require interpretation. Oliver's face turned grey. He began to shake. I can explain, he said, but his voice broke halfway through. I stared at him. You are still trying to explain, I said quietly. That is what is disgusting. Not the sex, not the lies. The instinct to save yourself first, even now. He made a small sound, almost a sob, and then the tears started. Heavy, sudden. The tears of a man who has finally run out of exits. I am sorry, he cried. I do not know what came over me. I swear it meant nothing. It was just foolish. Please, Hannah, please. He slid off the sofa and dropped to his knees. He grabbed for my hands, then my legs, clinging as if his grip could rewind time. I did not pull away at first. I simply stood there, still. His head pressed against my thigh, his shoulders shaking, his apologies spilling out in desperate fragments. I will end it. I will quit my job. I will do anything. We can fix this. We can start again. I looked down at him, and in that moment something in me went completely quiet. Not rage, not sorrow. A final, clean silence. I walked away from him without a word and went into the kitchen. The smell of dinner still hung in the air, thick and warm, like a cruel joke. The pot sat on the hob, the lid slightly ajar, steam still rising. All afternoon he had cooked it, stirred it, tasted it, played the devoted husband while his phone carried another life. I took the pot with both hands. It was heavier than I expected, and for a second the heat pressed into my palms. I carried it to the bin. Oliver stumbled after me, still on his knees at first, then crawling, then dragging himself up. Hannah, no, he begged. Please, do not, please. I tipped the pot. The stew poured out in one thick, steaming wave, splashing into the bin with a wet, ugly sound. The rich smell of spices collided with the sour stink of rubbish. Home turned to rot in 2 seconds. Oliver froze, as if I had poured something out of his body rather than a pot. I turned to him. My love for you was like that dinner, I said, my voice low and steady. It was warm. It was precious. It took time. It fed us. I stepped closer. But once it is contaminated, I continued, it is not dinner anymore. It is waste, and I do not eat waste. He covered his mouth with his hand, sobbing. He tried to reach for me again. This time I stepped back. Then I did the last thing I had been avoiding all night. I lifted my left hand and looked at the ring. 7 years, trapped in a circle of metal, promises, photos, family dinners, and a phone screen glowing quietly on a marble counter. I slid the ring off. It resisted for a moment, as if even it did not want to accept what was happening. Then it came free. I held it between my fingers and looked at Oliver. "Do you know what the worst part is?" I asked. He shook his head, tears falling. "You thought I would scream," I said. "You thought I would beg. You thought I would break in a way that made you the center of the story." I walked to the table and placed the ring beside the broken phone. 2 symbols, 2 endings, 1 truth. Oliver stared at them as if they were a sentence written in stone. I picked up my handbag. I did not threaten him. I did not negotiate. I simply said, "This is the trial, and you have already been found guilty." I turned toward the hallway. Behind me, he whispered my name again, broken and small. "Hannah." I did not answer. If you are still listening, do one simple thing for me. Comment 1 below. Not for the drama, but for every woman who has ever learned that closure does not always arrive with tears. Sometimes it arrives with quiet hands and a ring set down on a table. I did not raise my voice after that night. I did not call his parents. I did not post anything online. I did not tell mutual friends my version of the story. I let the system do what it was designed to do. The morning after I left, I woke up on my best friend's sofa. Charlotte had been my closest friend since university. She was the kind of woman who never wasted words, never panicked, and never lost. A solicitor specializing in corporate compliance and divorce law, she had built her career dismantling men who thought rules were optional. When she saw me standing at her door the night before, suitcase in hand, she did not ask questions. She simply said, "You can stay as long as you need." That morning she made tea, placed a mug in my hands and waited. So I told her everything. Not dramatically, not emotionally. I told it the way facts should be told. The message, the reply, the girl at the door, the evidence, the money, the lies. Charlotte listened without interrupting, her expression growing colder by the minute. When I finished, she leaned back and said one sentence. "Good. You did not destroy him. He destroyed himself." That was when the plan began. Not revenge, procedure. Charlotte explained something very clearly to me. In the UK, companies do not fear scandal, they fear paper trails. Oliver had not just crossed a moral line, he had crossed a professional one. A senior employee involved with a junior. Company funds used for personal expenses. False expense reports. Breach of internal conduct policies. It was all there, documented, time-stamped. Charlotte helped me organise everything: bank statements, screenshots, transfer histories, dates that overlapped with work hours, messages that proved an ongoing, inappropriate relationship. We did not exaggerate, we did not insult, we did not speculate. We simply compiled. On Monday morning, while Oliver was getting dressed for work, believing he still had time to fix things, Charlotte and I sent a single email. The subject line was short. Report of internal code of conduct violations. It went only to the people who mattered. Human resources, compliance, senior management. No drama, no threats, just facts. I pressed send. And that was it. I did not follow up. I did not call. I did not ask for updates. Justice does not need reminders. The first call came that afternoon. Oliver's number lit up my phone. I did not answer. The second call came an hour later. Then messages. At first, panic. Please talk to me. I can explain. They called me into a meeting. Then anger. How could you do this to me? You are ruining my life. I did not reply. By the next day, the tone changed again. Silence. Charlotte received confirmation before I did. Oliver had been suspended pending investigation. His access badge revoked. Company laptop confiscated. Expenses frozen. 3 days later, his termination became official. The reason was precise: gross misconduct, breach of professional ethics, misuse of company funds, inappropriate relationship with a subordinate. He did not leave with dignity. Security escorted him out of the building he had worked in for nearly a decade. People watched, people whispered. Reputations travel faster than facts. Once your name is tied to that kind of dismissal, doors close quietly. No one needs to shout. The intern did not survive either. Emily's contract was terminated the same week. Companies do not protect interns who become liabilities. She lost the role, the reference, the future she thought she was building. And just like that, the fantasy collapsed. No public spectacle, no screaming matches, just systems functioning as intended. The divorce was quieter. I filed through Charlotte's firm, uncontested. Grounds of adultery supported by evidence. Oliver tried once to contest it, not because he believed he was right, but because he believed delay might soften me. It did not. Assets were listed, accounts examined, property evaluated. The flat we lived in was in both our names. Charlotte made it very clear. Either he bought me out in full, or it would be sold. Oliver had no job, no savings that were not already spoken for, no leverage. The flat went on the market. When it sold, the mortgage was cleared, my share transferred, and the loan my parents had given us at the beginning of our marriage was repaid in full. Charlotte insisted on that. Debts to family are not optional, she said. They are contracts with memory. Oliver signed everything with shaking hands. He did not look at me during the final meeting. He looked smaller, older, like a man who had misjudged the cost of arrogance. I did not feel joy. I felt resolution. I moved into a smaller place, a quiet street, a flat that felt like mine alone. No echoes, no shared history clinging to the walls. I changed my routines, my number, my expectations. Oliver tried to contact me again months later. He said he wanted closure. I did not respond. Closure is not something you receive. It is something you give yourself. Emily disappeared from my life entirely. I heard through mutual connections that she left the city, that her social media went private, that she stopped answering messages. I did not follow her story. She was never the point. The point was this. I did not scream. I did not fight. I did not beg for respect. I withdrew. I documented. I let consequences do the talking, and they spoke very clearly. If you are listening to this, and you feel that quiet satisfaction settling in your chest, comment 1 below. Not because you enjoy destruction, but because you understand that sometimes the most powerful form of justice is silence backed by evidence. This is who I am now. Not the woman who stood in the kitchen that night, staring at a phone screen and watching her life split in two. Not the wife who memorized another woman's name against her will. And not the woman who needed answers from anyone else to feel whole again. I wake up these days in a smaller flat on a quiet street where the mornings begin with birds instead of tension. The windows face a row of old trees, their leaves changing colour with the seasons, reminding me that nothing stays the same forever, not even pain. My routines are simple now. I make coffee slowly. I read without checking my phone. I leave the house without wondering what might be waiting for me when I return. Peace is not loud. It does not announce itself. It arrives gently when you finally stop negotiating with your own boundaries. There are no echoes of arguments in these rooms, no memories clinging to the walls, no sense of being watched, measured, or quietly replaced. For the first time in years, the space I live in feels like it belongs to me. People often ask if I miss him. The honest answer is this: I miss who I thought he was. I miss the future I imagined. But I do not miss the version of myself I had to become in order to survive that marriage. That woman was always shrinking, always adjusting, always choosing silence to keep the peace. This woman chooses clarity. I did not emerge from this story bitter. I emerged precise. I know what I will not tolerate. I know the difference between love and convenience. I know that loyalty is not proven by words whispered in the dark, but by choices made when no one is watching. And most importantly, I know that leaving did not break me. Staying would have. Sometimes, late at night, messages still arrive. Women I have never met. Women whose names I will never know. They tell me about their own quiet doubts, about phones turned face down, about apologies that arrive too late, about the fear of starting over. One message stayed with me. I thought strength meant enduring. Your story taught me that strength can also mean walking away. I read that sentence more than once, because that is the truth we are rarely taught. Strength is not measured by how much pain you can absorb. It is measured by how much dignity you are willing to protect. I do not regret the way I handled things. I did not scream. I did not humiliate. I did not burn everything down just to feel powerful. I documented. I waited. I stepped aside, and I allowed consequences to land where they belonged. That choice gave me something priceless, my future. I have plans now that do not require permission, dreams that do not depend on anyone else's honesty, a life that expands instead of contracts. Some evenings I sit on the balcony with a glass of wine and watch the city lights flicker on one by one. I think about how close I came to staying somewhere that was quietly destroying me, and I feel grateful. Not for the betrayal, not for the pain, but for the moment I chose myself. If you are listening to this and you are standing at the edge of a decision you are afraid to make, let me tell you something gently. You are not weak for wanting peace. You are not dramatic for needing respect, and you are not selfish for choosing a life that does not require you to disappear. This is who I am now, a woman who trusts her instincts, a woman who knows her worth, a woman who understands that freedom is not loud, but it is unmistakable. If this story stayed with you, if it spoke to a quiet place in your chest, tell me. Where are you listening from? And what does freedom look like to you? I will meet you in the comments.